Thank you. So I just wanted to take a few minutes. I know that we probably have more listeners on with the meeting tonight than we may have in the past.
I have to call to order.
No, it's public hearing. We don't call order till.
Sorry. Knowing that we probably have a few more joiners with us this evening in regards to what we have on the agenda, we just wanted to take a few minutes and have some discussion on how we got here. We've had several meetings over the last course of the last 2 to 3 months regarding the Middleton School District budget. And I just wanted to bring everybody up to speed so that you kind of have the historical knowledge on how we got here. So the district was tasked with cutting $2.3 million from the budget. This was after the supplemental levy and the amount of $1.5 million we passed. We ran it once in March, it failed. We ran it again in May, it failed. And in June, we had to cut that money, which we have relied on for a number of years, out of the budget. It's allowed us to provide many things, one of them being athletics without a pay-to-participate requirement. In addition to that failed levy, the district had a 1% holdback from the state in May and was hit with another 5% holdback from the state in July. Currently, we have cut $2 million from the budget. Athletics accounts for approximately $400,000 of that $2 million. And then the remaining $300,000 resulted in a projected lower fund balance for the end of next year. In regards to fund balance, the district is currently violating our own policy by not having a fund balance of at least 5%, which would be about $1.2 million. And we are far below what is actually recommended, which would be a 3-month reserve at over $6 million. I wanted to take a couple minutes and just address some of the information that has been floating around. I know I only have, access to a small snippet of it. But I guess first, I would really encourage people to examine the district's documents and ask questions if they are not sure what they are looking at. School finance is complicated, and there's a lot of individuals here that can help explain those questions, answer those questions, and do more than speculate on the situation. So a few of the misconceptions I've seen out there. I want to clear up that the stipends for coaches and athletic transportation are currently not in the budget. I know that some individuals think that that was already added in the budget and that we are now taking those out as a ploy to pass the levy. We simply don't have the funds necessary to support athletics without further negatively impacting academics. Should the levy pass in August, the district would be in a position where we could subsidize athletic costs for playing to participate. Another misconception I saw, the $6 million posted on our budget summary is actually for our bond payments, which we have over $5 million in payments due. That is not the district's fund balance. That money is collected and set aside for the bond and can only be used to pay down the bond. Additionally, I've seen that the district's allocations are posted on social media as our expenses. One of the items that I have seen appear and reappear again a few times is salary increases for the MSD administration. And I just want to clarify that administration did not take an increase in salaries for next year. Instead, they voluntarily took a 3-day furlough, even though they already work more days than they are paid for. The posting of that $52,000 in administration was the increase to the district's allocation for administration next year. So not only did our administrators not take an increase when a larger allocation was provided by the state, they took a decrease. For anyone that isn't up to speed on the recent board meetings or hasn't read the supporting information, please be aware that federal and state funding does not support athletics. Athletics is just one of many areas the district has cut to achieve our operations without 10% of our budget. In addition to athletics, I want to make sure that everybody is aware that we have cut additionally the following things: a middle school counselor, 4.6 teachers, a district level administrator, our dean of students at the high school, our 504 coordinator at the high school, a halftime school psychologist, our district public information officer, a maintenance staff position, a food service staff position, 1 school resource officer out of 2 when it was recommended that we really should have 3, 16 school aides. We've reduced all of the supply budgets for programs in all schools. And we've gone to the 4-day week where almost all of our classified staff took a pay cut. We have foregone our science adoption, and we have frozen classified salaries. So I guess in closing, I would just say, the district administration has worked tirelessly to cut the budget in a way that would least impact our students' right to an education. And in doing so, we were able to cut between 1.6 and 1.7 without touching athletics. And as we know, the cuts have to go deeper, which is what has brought us to the conversation for tonight.
Thank you, Kristen, for the review, the recap. I guess so from my standpoint, for our $2.3 million cuts, 300,000 of that is coming out of our already too thin fund balance. 1.6 to 1.7 million has come out of educational monies. And right now we're at a 400K cut in athletics, plus or minus. I can say, personal note, of the 1.6 million cuts in educational needs, I haven't received one email. And so now we're on a hot topic of athletics that we know is the culture of our town. It's Friday Night Lights. We've been successful for decades. But we failed to pass a levy enough times to where, with that combined with the COVID holdbacks, we're at critical mass. And we have Andy here tonight, Akeney, to kind of run through, answer some questions. We've got plenty from the public. I think it's best to kind of roll through with Andy to try to talk with some of the questions that we've seen out there to uncover some of that. And then have a discussion as a board on what we think our next steps are and how we move forward and how we maintain, the level of education we've had. We've got graduating senior this year to D1 college playing football. We've got kids going into the Naval Academy. We've been able to put this together, and I don't think we want to take a step backwards. And we got to figure out how we can pull together and make this work. There's not a secret pot of money out there right now. So that's a little bit of my opinion, but Andy, if you can maybe, I know we've got some talking points we've been kind of looking through the emails. So anybody else want to say anything before we turn the floor over to?
I would real quick. First of all, I really appreciate all of the community input as far as all the emails. I've read every one that's been put in front of me. Many of them I agree wholeheartedly with. Some, I think there's a few people that may not be educated enough with knowing what has been going on and what administrative costs have been cut to date. And it's just based on athletics. But I do want to say that I really appreciate everybody's input as far as that goes. And I'm sure Andy, as well as us during the discussions, will answer some of the questions that were on some of the emails and what have you to try to find a resolution or something that we can figure out here. But, I just can't stress enough that we've gone over the numbers, 1.6 million here, 300 here, and everything else. The bottom line is we have to cut $2 million because we could not pass a levy. That's what it boils down to. And unfortunately, that is the realization of the way it is. So we're forced to make these not bad decisions, but hard decisions because we have not been able to get the support, whether it's from understanding of what the levy really does, which I don't think a lot of people do not understand. And especially this particular levy that's not increasing any cost to the taxpayer. Zero. So I struggle with this every day when our administration, our staff is working extremely hard, cutting everything down to the bone, which directly affects our kids, every single one of them, whether it's athletics, whether it's special education, music, what have you. But I struggle with this every single day, that we can't seem to get the people on board to pass something to help our students get the educations that they deserve. And that's just my opinion.
I would add that 2 of the 3 board members here are ex-college athletes. All 3 of us understand the importance of athletics to our kids, to our attendance, to positive mental outlook, to our town, to participation in everything. So that is not lost on us. We're just faced with a budget crisis, and that's what we're trying to figure out.
I struggle as well as anybody else. I have 2 boys that are both 2 and 3 sport athletes in school. So I understand the ramifications just as much as anyone in the community. And being a board member, it even struggles. I have more struggles with it just because I know what the numbers are. I've seen how hard the administration has worked to make the cuts that we need to make the cuts due to the state's, holdbacks and cutbacks and everything else. And for us just trying to move forward, it's a very struggling time.
And I think maybe too, just as a side note, public schools or public education, we are not required by law to participate in sports. 33-312, I can't remember, subsection 12, it just says that that any student or such extracurricular activity shall not be deemed a necessary element of a public school education, but shall be considered to be a privilege. And when we're talking bare bones, I think that legislation is important to how we got here. We didn't just start picking and choosing athletics over music or athletics over drama, or those things have an educational component and a credit attached to them. So their funding is different and there is requirements for those. But my kids play sports and the financial impact is great for my family. So I also think that I'm excited to hear what Andy has to hear, and hopefully we can work through this, and hopefully the community will be willing to support whatever that decision is, and we can have the same support no matter what the outcome is going forward to make this the best situation out of the worst situation.
With that, Andy?
So yeah, we'll say a couple things to get going, sort of come through to how we came to this particular schedule, and then we can start answering questions and going through some questions and having a discussion. I read through some things on Facebook today. I've read some of the questions that came to you all as well, just as I was prepping. I think one of the things, just have a better understanding of, if you look at high school athletics or high school athletics in Middleton, it's not necessarily the middle school right now, but just high school in general, there's sort of funding that comes from 3 different areas into the high school. So teams will fundraise themselves for needs and wants that they need within that particular program. Then as a high school, we have ticket money, concession money, we sell family passes, the ASB card, and then all of that money is used to support all programs, and that includes as well choir and dance and cheer and drama and marching band, sort of funnel under that athletics activities umbrella. And then the school district portion, which is what we're talking about tonight, what the school district has paid for years, has simply been the transportation and stipends. Just that component only of an athletic program. We handle everything else up at the high school through the funds that we have come in from ticket sales and concessions. And that even includes giving money back to programs to help them out, since I have been there best we can. So that's sort of that's what it looks like. And just so we have a better understanding, with our ticket money, as it comes in, a lot of that instantly turns back around and pays for the officials. and it pays for the workers at games, and it pays for our athletic trainer. And we put it in different accounts so that we as a high school aren't asking the school district for money to go to a state tournament, or money to do this or that we're able to handle that with some of the things that we have. So there's sort of three components of it, correct? So the part that we're really discussing tonight is the transportation part and the stipend part, which is what the district has provided all these years without having a pay to participate component to it.
Which, and could you clarify what stipends mean?
So coaching side, yeah, so we have, stipends are what the coaches would make to coach. So each sport, like girls and boys basketball, each have 4 stipend allotments. So each one of those 4 individual, coaches, based on if they're head coach or an assistant or whatever the salary schedule is, that's how they would get paid. So that's what those stipends are that we're talking about in particular. So as we looked at this, and I've done numbers a bunch of different ways, the numbers that are presented right now, as you look at that bottom number, 282,600, that is what the school district has been providing for the high school athletic program in terms of stipends for coaches, transportation fees to games. The high school programs actually pay if we use a bus for practice. We cover that ourselves. So this is just transportation to games, as well as the athletic director's salary. And I've looked at it both ways, with or without, the AD salary in it, but the 282,600. Remember, this is an estimate based off last year, 1920, looking at what we paid coaches this past year, as well as how many participants we had. So once again, it's an estimate. The transportation, I did the estimate based on the numbers from this past year, and I know what the increased costs are to travel. And I just did it based on us going to Bishop Kelly. I know if we go to Caldwell, it's going to be cheaper, right? I just sort of picked a spot and said, we'll just do it that way for the sake of this. So the numbers that you see there, as we look at the pay to participate schedule for Middleton High School athletics, number of players was based on last year's roster. The cost per sport there includes coaching stipends, transportation, and the AD salary. And then you have the cost per player. Now, Cheryl said this earlier, those aren't the raw numbers. So the cost per sport and the cost per player have changed a little, either direction for some programs, just so we could have some type of equality there. So the minimum at 250, the max at 550. So some programs, if you do the raw numbers, were well above 550, and some programs were below 250, if that makes sense. So just trying to have common ground there with numbers.
So I want to clarify that again.
Yeah.
So in your modeling, you set parameters of the minimum a sport would pay would be 250, and the max was 550, and then the numbers rolled out like that. So that smoothed out some of the bumps. Gave you a bracketed.
It smoothed out the disparity that we had between about 4 or 5 different programs.
Okay.
So we don't have extremes, if you know what I'm saying. At least this made it somewhat equal for all participants. So that's how we came to that. As we've looked at numbers, trying to figure out, once again, the cost of, what the school district has always provided, not what we're always able to take care of at the high school, and what programs are able to take care of as they fundraise for specific needs and wants within those programs. That's even with some of the money that we're able to kick back to those programs. It's not a lot, but it helps. It's part of their budget. So I'm not sure where you guys want to head next with that. I don't know if you have any particular questions, but that's how we came to that number. But I do think it's important for people to understand that there's sort of 3 aspects of where money's coming from and who's been paying for what all these years in different ways. This year is gonna be interesting again. You know, just as we take a look at even the high school athletic budget, you know, if I'm not able to let fans into games, correct, then I have to go into my rainy day funds, which some of those are for new facilities. High school's 10 years old, right? Or some of those are out of the facilities. I mean, for example, if all the lights on the soccer field go out, and we have to replace them, I'm not asking them to pay for it, right? I'm asking the money that we have set aside for repairs. We'll take care of that. But if we don't have fans in the games this year, or very limited based on COVID, then, you know, we as a high school now are going to be scrambling to identify how to pay officials, because their pay rate's not changing, you know, and some of those other things that we have, so.
So from a budgeting standpoint, the ASB cards, the concessions, admission into games, so that money all is broken out by line item, Cheryl, in the high school or the middle school as far as income, and then by accounts, how does that break out?
That money is actually kept in a separate bank account specific to the high school or the middle school. And yes, the money's receipted through the student fees section if they sell an ASB, or the gate money's collected and put into, and then Andy separates it out into the different teams, groups, different allocations that way.
Okay.
And then I oversee it as far as looking at reconciliations and things that way, but the money is not mingled into the district's general account.
But if somebody wanted to see it, it's all there
Yes.
at the high school level by line item. Is
And
that,
actually, I post it in the board packet every month. If you see the school's account breakdowns, it'll tell you, you know, which sport, football has this much money, band has this much money. So we report that monthly to the public as well.
And so as we look at those monies, as the coaches fundraise, we have discussions about it quite often, and we're trying to do a better job in terms of how we fundraise, right? It's much better to do like football does and do one big luau a year, to do a bunch of small things. It's our boys and girls basketball programs, if they have their couple of 2 or 3 day kids camps, you know, they sell those ads in the gym, so they make more than enough money for their needs and wants, just doing those things where we're not asking student athletes best we can to go out and knock on a door, correct? Because we don't want to ever, we're trying to get away from that side of it. But that money is those programs' money. I mean, we might have discussions in terms of using it wisely, but that's their money to use as a best team for their program, which is what you do when you have coaches. That's why you hire them. But then on the other side, that ticket money that comes in, then it's account number 511. And I have it budgeted out. I mean, anyone can look at it and share it, the whole deal. Then I move that to other accounts. So for example, officials on a yearly basis probably cost us $20,000 to $22,000 for all sports. So, you know, as ticket money comes in, and then I just kick whatever out to the officials account, and that's how we pay them from there. So that's just one example of one of our big expenditures that happens yearly. But that's something the programs don't have to fundraise for, right? They don't have to worry about that. We've taken that off their plate. That's our responsibility as a high school athletic department.
Of course, we don't have any fundraising going on now at this point, which makes it even harder because of, you know, the COVID. So, you know.
So I think part of it is, and I look at this first question where it says, it is unreasonable to expect the parents of Middleton schools to provide 100% of the cost of being on a sports team. Yes, but as we look at what we're talking about here, you know,
transportation
and coaching stipends, not officials, and not training room supplies, and not, you know, the tournament fees that we pay for. So our basketball team can go to Preston, or our boys wrestling team can go to a tournament in Minico, right? So they don't have to fundraise for that. We'll figure out how we can have that money so we can allow that to happen as well.
And I think it's important to note that it also does not include the cost of gymnasiums, the cost of the stadium, the cost of the utilities to maintain it, the cleaning, you know, those are expenses that are also incorporated into the district's budget.
You know, and I would say this, I am not, you know, I don't want to be in this spot as an athletic director. You know, I've talked with you guys about this. I've talked with the district administration about this. I hate the idea of pay to participate. You know, it's, but unfortunately where we are right now with the budget, hopefully, you know, we can be creative, levy passes, and we can do some different things, but, this is not my desire. Nor do I think it's anyone's desire. It just happens to be where we are.
So we're basically taking the cost of 650, 700 athletes and taking the coaches' stipends, the AD, and the transportation, and having them all pay it versus 4,000 students or 10,000 people in the town. That's how this $400,000 is getting cut up. The transportation stipends, ADs, the burden's being borne by 700 athletes versus 4,000 students or 10, 11,000 residents.
So can you address maybe some of the, I know there was a bunch of questions about what if they shut down high school sports, or what if you don't have enough kids try out to put together a team, or are going to be refunds? Are there payment options? Are there, like, what kind of discussions have there been around those topics?
Few discussions, lots of thinking about what that looks like and what that could look like. I mean, I think there's numerous concerns as you look at that. I think the biggest concern is we are estimating that actually 650 to 700 kids would come out, correct? One of the big questions on the table is, wow, only 500 kids come out. What happens? Because that's a drastic change in numbers at that point. But if we do not have a season and it is paid to participate and the season doesn't exist, then unfortunately, you know, which would be horrible, but yeah, at that point, a refund would need to take place. We got to accurately keep track of those records, because if you are not playing, we have no reason to keep that money, because at that point, we're not paying coaches stipends, we're not paying transportation. Heck, we're not even paying my salary at that point.
There's been questions about FFA band, the arts, music. So we know some of those, Alicia, you referred to as they're for credit. So comes out of a different, that's educational money when it's a class per credit.
And speaking to that, there are a few, and I've talked with Chris and Cheryl both about this. I just didn't have time and all this to get these numbers out there as well. It's uniquely different, but there are some groups that we have, there are some things that take place that some of those groups, and I don't know what those numbers would look like yet, would definitely have to pay something based on what it is. So we do, I mean, drama falls under the Idaho High School Activities Association. So not actually the plays we put on in this school building, right? That would be funneled through a class. But there is a District 3 drama competition. There is state drama. We've had kids go the last 3 years. We've paid for them because they made it to state. It's like football makes it to a state tournament. We paid for them to go, the hotels, the whole thing. However, if that's taking place, right, that's outside of the classroom. That's not a class credit deal. Then those individuals, we would have to have some type of fee for them as well now, because there is transportation taking place and there is a stipend associated with that drama teacher. Same thing with speech and debate. There's a state championship for speech. There's a state championship for debate. They go to tournaments. This year wasn't bad. All the kids were older. We all had them sign the waiver that we have in our policy. They all drove themselves, just because when you're there for a speech or a debate, you're there for 5 minutes, you do your deal, and then you either wait around for 8 hours or you go home at that point. So that was able to save us some money that way. Color guard, which is part of the marching band, but there's not really we do a winter percussion deal. There's some different choir groups, some things with band. I mean, there's some different things that we got to look through that aren't just athletics, but also aren't necessarily tied to a class credit. So what does that look like as well in terms of being fair. I just don't have those numbers yet.
Okay, so getting down to brass tacks, what is other schools in our district doing in this situation? I mean, what does West Ada do? What does CUNA do? What does BK, well, BK's private. What does Nampa?
So Napa at one time charged, and I'll just give you some numbers that I've
Yep.
and some ADs haven't gotten back. I mean, I know what they are. They haven't gotten back to me in terms of this is how we break it down.
Yeah.
So I know at Napa at one time they had a $50 or $70 athletic fee, whatever they called it. When that took place in the Napa school district, it was because they did not pass a levy.
Right.
When they did end up passing it, those fees were either reduced or they removed them.
Right.
CUNA is I think, once again, 70, but I'm not sure what that goes to at all. West Ada's at 110, and all of West Ada's money goes directly to pay for coaching stipends. West Ada, though, is also an interesting spot. When they go to away games, majority of those kids are all driving themselves to away games. I don't think they'd actually do that for some of the bigger ones, like football. They might figure out how to, or the football program figures out how to get a bus and they just pay for it out of their own fundraising. But I've been out here before for baseball games, and all the Eagle kids just drive to the game themselves. You know, so that's one way to eliminate, but West Ada's goes towards that. Homedale's $75 per, their $75 goes, 25 goes to transportation, 25 goes to coaching stipends, and 25 goes to that particular program. Caldwell and Valley View do not have a pay to participate at this time. Their ASB fees is the same as ours has been for the past few years, $35. But they do not have a pay to play this time. Emmett's at $50. Could be a little more, and I'm not sure what, they didn't get back on me for what that breakdown was.
But Caldwell and Nampa or Caldwell and Valley both have supplemental levies in place too, is that correct?
So, yeah, I don't know what would happen if not. I don't know what they would have to do with that.
So most everybody we just mentioned has a supplemental levy in place like we've had for years.
Homedale is the only one.
Home to
And a lot of the smaller schools do have a pay to play, but it's you know, $70 to $100 and they break it up.
Right.
Accordingly.
Thank you.
Can we, what does our transportation contract look like? Like, could we put a bid out just for our athletic transportation instead of using the bus company?
I think we could, yes. The contract is for our home to school. And then they charge us per route per mile for any extracurricular,
Yeah, anything on the road is based on miles and
They quote
hours
it.
at the event.
if they have to wait. And so, yes, it's outside of the contract.
So that would be an area maybe we could possibly get bids on and look at different transportation options, possibly.
I just don't think we're gonna make up that much
Yeah,
money. It'd be more that idea of no transportation.
Right.
Eliminated.
Yeah.
Eliminate transportation and do, which we take on, you know. it's-
What's their liability insurance for West Ada for having kids drive themselves?
I would not know. I'd have to ask their district athletic.
Because our liability
I think
insurance.
because
are-
it's extracurricular, I don't know that the district would have any, as long as they were disclosed it up front.
Yeah.
They had to sign a waiver
Yeah,
or something.
probably.
But even within that, I think you could also give the right or the opportunity for programs if they did raise
Funds,
Funds.
funds.
For
Because
transportation.
there are some programs it's best to have
a bus.
us.
Sure.
And for others, it we'd be okay without it, yes.
Let me see these questions, make sure we're trying to get,
We can just go down some of these if you.
I think try to, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say in regards to the transportation question, I had reached out to legal counsel to get an opinion on transportation to athletics, and they agreed, not required, but suggested that if it's cut, we cut it all together instead of
One way.
perhaps transporting there and then just leaving kids hanging, that we would need to either cut it all together or provide it all together.
Well, in the one-way trip on an athletic event, the only thing you would say would be waiting time,
The drive
right? You're gonna drive there and back. So the
Oh, that's right.
waiting time's probably
It's the hours that would get eliminated from the cost.
Right. They're not, I mean, the miles are the same.
I'm just looking through some of these again. I mean, I think the big concern for everyone is my concern as well, without question. I just don't know what will happen with numbers on our teams. You know, my thought is the teams that are sort of rely or are heavy club teams already. So both soccer's, baseball, softball, girls and boys basketball and volleyball. They might be, or have some parents with a greater understanding of, and they might be able to withstand it a little better. I think it'll hurt football. I think it'll hurt track. I think it'll hurt cross country, wrestling, big time. Just based on,
Well, it has to hurt basketball too.
and it will, but maybe not to the extent, that's just a thought.
That's sport.
You know, I think it's going to eliminate some kids coming out to play because they can't afford it, even though we could try to put together payment plans and different things like that, but it's gonna potentially eliminate an opportunity for some young men and women to participate. One question, I'm trying to think here.
So, Kristen and Cheryl, so looking at what West Ada does at $110 a pop for each sport, and then after 2 sports, then the third one's waived, okay? So based on that, let's say we have no supplemental levy, and we run some numbers based off of that, around that same scenario, okay? Where does that leave us shortfall compared to right now? And what would we have to make up? And I know you can't probably go right off the top of your head, but is there
Probably about 200,000.
about 200? So,
71,500 for 650 kids at 110, so.
well, but it is, let's say, so Andy, in your number is 657, are some of these 2 sport athletes?
Yeah, so what we did with that.
2 or 3, let's say.
Not 3. We
Okay.
took those out of the equation. So that number, all I did was count rosters,
Yeah,
and then I eliminated the 3 sport kids.
so let's say there can't be more than probably 10%.
No, I think we had only 10 kids last year that played 3 sports.
Yeah.
Out of
Okay,
everybody.
or even 2, no, I'm talking
Oh,
2
2
sports.
sports
So there's,
2 sports was 110.
so a little over 10, 15% then. So out of that. But is that reflected in the numbers?
Yes,
Okay,
it is.
okay.
So that number includes, yes, my guess was $699 for this year. So we had, once again, estimate, but give or take 571 sport athletes.
Yep.
That includes cheer and dance.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
part of that number. And then 115 to 120 2-sport kids.
So 20%. Okay. And so what's our shortfall then? Would you had a Kurt?
That's like 290.
Close to 200.
290.
Well, you gotta count the 2 different. Middle school is different than the high school.
I'm just leaving out the middle school just for now. It's not saying it's not important. I'm just trying to take it one step at a time.
So let's say if we have 675 kids come out,
Um,
they each pay 110.
You're talking high school numbers.
Yes, high school.
now?
Yeah.
So that puts us at 74,250.
Okay.
So that would get us close to 200,000. That's my salary still included.
Yeah. And we need what, 4?
Sorry, Andy, walk me back one more time. How'd you get close to 200?
Well, I just rounded it off. So if you go 282,000 minus, what is it,
74,000. You'd still have, the district would still have to come up with the 200,000.
$208,000 is still left on the table.
And does that 282 include you?
So the 282 includes me, coaching stipends.
So it's roughly, yeah.
How much is transportation? If we pull transportation all together, and
My
what,
estimate
this
this
is
year,
just for high school,
my
not
estimate this year would be close to 33,000.
33,000.
Once again, that's give or take, right? I mean, I don't, if you don't make it, if you host all your district playoff games, you don't travel.
So napkin numbers, you're right at 2. You're gonna be close to 200,000.
Sure.
Yep. So one, I hate asking it. 2, I don't think it's there anyway. I mean, just from what I've seen that the administration has done in the cuts that we've already cut at 1.6 million, is there anything left? I mean, really, that's a question that, I mean, I'm sure the community or parents or whatever would like to know that, but I mean, is there a possibility without a levy? Okay. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out here how we can keep our programs, keep the majority of the student athletes involved. And it would be unfortunate that some would not get to participate, but at the same time, we got to look at the realization of what it is. But also keeping the academics as high as we possibly can based on our shortfalls and everything else. Trying to see if we can somehow figure something out to make this thing work.
I mean, if we cut out all busing, right, to and from school. I mean, right, those are the numbers we're talking about now to get there. Cheryl, we get some funding from the state for busing, but what are we paying out of pocket for busing?
We get about 65% reimbursement when I looked year to year.
I think we're paying about between 600 and 700,000.
So we're paying
Yeah.
600, 700,000 just in busing for school.
We're looking, or we're trying to work with our provider to consolidate, reduce routes to try to get that down.
Well, and possibly that's going to change this year anyway, depending on what happens with schools and who's going online and who's not and
Right.
that sort of thing. I mean, obviously that could change, but that could be just for a short period of time. That's a Band-Aid.
And then I think you have to think about the other things that could also change that are not in our favor, right? All of the costs that we may incur this year that we aren't necessarily yet counting on,
Right.
that may come into play based on the situation that we're in with COVID.
So an example would be like mandated masks or needing more cleaning supplies or having to install air filtration systems
Or webcams for teachers
Yep.
need to go online so they can teach. And,
Online meeting software.
yep. Software programs,
Another
more
thing
computers.
that people don't realize is when COVID hit in the spring, everyone was very generous. A lot of the programs were free. GoToMeetings was free. That is not the case. And that is stuff that we didn't budget for all the way. I think, Kristen, what'd you say? GoToMeetings is going to be
We were quoted
4,000
4,000 a month.
a month to be able to have GoToMeetings. So these are the things in the budget where, I mean, we had this discussion with the teachers a little bit ago, like pick and choose, we're to that's how bare bones we're at right now in the budget.
So for transportation, I mean, what if we had everybody within 5 miles of school there's no busing?
That's not allowable.
How you figure
1.5
out?
The
miles.
law
1.5?
says-
Okay, well, I know there's some, so
So
1.5 miles from school, we could pull transportation.
Except for your safety busing,
Which-
right? So
yeah.
any designated routes that are in place for safety.
I'm in
Yeah, no.
I'm in kind of the business what if world. We just throw it out there to see.
Well, we have nothing to lose. We got to find some money somewhere.
I mean,
So-
that,
Can some of the sports, like girls basketball has a fund built up, right? Like money carries over. They don't spend everything that they fundraise every year, correct?
Correct.
can they use that money to help pay for their own coaches? Can they use that money to help pay for busing if they want to? Or is that strictly for equipment and, I mean.
It is not necessarily for that. I think that, so some of our, and that's why we've tried to stay away from, getting away from knocking on the door to sell stuff, right? Because in the gist of it, if we're fundraising, we want that money best we can to go back to the kids. Some programs do and will pay for a non-stipend coach, so someone the school district hasn't been paying for, because we usually need more coaches than what the stipends are. That's still funneled through sheriff office over X amount, but that's money the coaches have raised themselves, maybe through advertisements, things like that. So they can have those extra coaches, but they're not getting the same amount of stipend as the stipend coaches are. But those things go fast. If you're buying new basketballs and shooting shirts that we keep, but yet sweatshirts for the girls, right? You want them to look like a team. You want them to feel good. You want them to look good. You want those programs to be able to have some autonomy in how they spend that money that they have actually fundraised themselves for those kids that particular year. And if they want to choose to take a bus, in theory, okay? We paid for the swimming team at practice at the College of Idaho every morning last fall at 5 a.m. We had a bus for them. They didn't pay for it. We reimbursed the school district the cost of that bus because it was a practice and not a game. So, we're doing some of those things. Take a charter bus to a state tournament, depending on the distance. We're paying for that charter bus because it's not a yellow bus.
I think there was a few comments in these emails about parents who said that we should get rid of transportation to and from sporting events to help. I know for the high school kids, that's not an issue. Middle school, I don't think that would be feasible.
And I know we're not to the middle school yet, but there's a difference in the fees.
Right.
For middle school and the high school. I was trying to look at some numbers. I don't know. I think there needs to be a lot on the table because you look at eliminating transportation and you basically say, okay, if you as a program need to be able to identify how to get kids there based on the sport and you do have money in your budget, then it is a lot easier to get 5 kids to a golf tournament by themselves than it is 46 kids to a varsity football game at Bishop Kelly. Those are 2 different discussions.
Mm-hmm.
What do we charge for gate? Is there a way to generate additional income by raising the price?
We can't. All SIC schools are tied together. So when you go to any of our sporting events, it's going to cost the same if it's a 5A or 4A school. Yeah. Yep.
We could sell additional sponsorships.
Yeah, there's things that we could continue to work on and look at with that.
To generate additional income to help offset. Go to local businesses,
And a lot of programs are already doing that just as part of their fundraising, right? Trying to do some different things with signs on the stadiums. And I want to allow them to give them that. Up till this point, we have allowed them some of that flexibility unless it was maybe a bigger donor. We'd have some stuff up in some different areas for that. But up until this point, I wanted the program as best they could to try to generate some of that money because it's an easy fundraising deal where, once again, the kids aren't going and knocking on a door, right? The coaches are a little more involved with that, being able to generate some money and some income in that they can help in various needs within the program. Opposed to me saying, no, I'm going to now call all these people because of A, B, C, D, and E. I'm not saying we're not there at this point, but that's sort of where we've been up to this point.
One of the questions on here, how does our budget compare with other SIC schools?
I think we are able to do a little bit more for our programs because the amount of people that we have that come to games here. Like if you go to, we have a big time following at Middleton. And you come to our home games and it's packed out, right? Our concession stand does unbelievable well. That allows us to do some other things and not be quite as tight within our budget. It also allows us to start setting money aside for, resurfacing and relining the track, which needs to happen sooner rather than later. And, the football field is almost 10 years in and we're doing a good job because that's all we do on it. But at some point, that's another $800,000, that needs to be taken care of because of the turf. So we're able to do some things. We do have some money it's set aside, but it's in very specific accounts because of, titled facilities. Right? Or this year, maybe we need some of that rainy day money that's still in athletics. They'll pay for officials if we can't have as many people in games. Like I said, since I've been here, we've tried to be very, very supportive in terms of, and I 100%, I think we have it better off than any other SIC school. Without question, that is because of the community support. You guys know this. It is unbelievable here. It is as good as it gets in the state of Idaho. I love them. They're awesome. The support's great. And that is what has enabled us to not come down here knocking on the door, asking for money for things and being able to support ourselves for state tournaments and being able to help out drama and speech and debate when they go to events, being able to pay those entrance fees. That's an example.
Sure. That's why I think it's very important that we try to do what we can to not lose that. That's the whole, it is such a big support for our community and everything else, and as well as the students and what have you. So trying to do everything we can to facilitate that and not take those steps backwards and eliminate all of athletics or eliminate, a bunch of different sports and stuff like that. Have we looked at, and I've mentioned this before, but if we looked at what it would look like if the levy does pass? How does that affect us right now? If, let's say the levy, because I've always talked about worst case scenario, right? We have no levy. It hasn't passed twice. It is what it is. Here's where we are. Let's say it does pass. Where does that leave us as far as in our discussion we're having today?
So in terms of athletics, my recommendation would be that we remove Randy's salary and benefits from this equation, take all of that out, and then try to reduce that cost by 50% more. So first take his out, and then what's left, try to mix that by 50% that we then subsidize.
So you're saying take his out, so that drops it to 200. We knock out 100, some in other fashions within it for a pay to play or something to that effect. And then we subsidize the other 100. So if we were to, if best case scenario, all the stars aligned and what have you, and this does go and we did that 110 or somewhere close to that number could potentially do that.
We would be close. We would be in the ballpark.
Yes. It would without question put us in the ballpark.
Okay.
Just by doing the math I just did.
Okay.
Well, I think there's opportunity within the athletic department, within the high school, to maybe change our practices in selling sponsorships, selling advertising.
But you got to look at that as
free advertising.
You got to look at that as gravy on top. Okay, that's to help even facilitate even more. But we got to look at the raw numbers and say, okay, this is where we need to do to be there to make that. The rest of it, the selling sponsorships, the fundraisers, once the COVID lacks, and hopefully we can get some more fundraisers out there to benefit money wise. I like the sponsorship idea, stuff like that. And hopefully we'll be able to get some gate sales and be able to supplement that sort of thing. But I personally see that as gravy on top, where you're helping to still facilitate and build off of that.
Yeah, and I think we have been, because of this community, since I've been here, we have been blessed, I'll phrase it that way, because we have success, we have people coming, that's enabled us to generate this income that has helped us to have, in terms of we're not knocking on the door asking for money, we're able to take care of what things are up there. But I'm with you in terms of, I do know we have a unique opportunity now, especially when it comes to bigger sponsorships. Not necessarily what football might raise for the signs across the field, right? Or what basketball does for the signs on the gym. But we have some areas at the high school that we could, without question, start going after bigger fish, just in turn, if nothing else, to help at times offset some of these things if we're down that road again. But it is gravy on top.
Right.
You can't, yeah. We gotta be able to cover out of the district budget somehow salaries, stipends, transportation. Those are the only three things.
Right.
Right,
But here we are again. I mean, in order to be able to maintain that or even get something like that to fly, I mean, we've got to have something like a levy to make that happen, to be able, because she's already talked about, Kristen and Cheryl and the whole administrative staff has already talked about the cuts that regardless of the levy, even if it's passed, these cuts are still there. Okay, those aren't going away. So, I mean, this is just to help us even facilitate and keep what we have based on those cuts we have and not have to cut any more and potentially cut stuff that we may never get back. That's what I'm afraid of.
I'm nervous that the cost as presented right now is so high that people who are very active in sports will choose to enroll their kids in other districts, which means no attendance for us, which means a decrease in funding, right? I mean, it's a double-edged sword. Like, I don't know. And I don't know if decreasing it by $200, like if we pulled out Andy's contract and we pulled out transportation and it's $300 a person or whatever, if that would even matter. Like at this point, I don't know if it's an all or nothing situation, if it's, the sports team saying we're only going to have one school issued uniform. We're not buying matching sweatshirts this year. We're going to help pay for some of our teammates to play. Like, I don't know what it's going to take, but I'm nervous that, I agree. Sports is such a big part of some kids. That's the only reason they come to school. And so I feel like, trying to be sensitive to that. COVID's put a lot of restrictions on a lot of the way we fundraise, how we get together and associate. There's just so many unknowns.
But even with
try and
that
guess.
number, Kristen can't tell us where that money's coming from. Like,
Right.
that's the philosophically, without the levy, and we've got to have a budget before the levy. That's the.
Right. And then it could change. I will say, I'm in agreement that there needs to be something, okay? Because all the other districts, for the most part, have some sort of extracurricular pay-to-play program in place. It's a matter of finding that balance. I like the way West Ada does their programming and whatever that number is, 110, 120, whatever, but for each sport. And then if you're a 3-sport athlete, you get the next one free or whatever. Their design works. It seems to work.
But if you look at the numbers, people sent it to me. Their participation in sports went from like 6,400 to 5,600 with pay to play. They even lost 1,000. That's the idea of pay to play, right? It's going to reduce our numbers no matter what the number is. We've got to make it palatable, I think. But our ultimate goal, I think, should be not to pay to play. That's not next year, but I just think down the road, our goal should be, if we can figure that out, it should be a two-phase process to where we can get something to get it down to 125. If we can go less than that, then great. I mean, I don't think we should ever lose sight of that. That we do lose students at any pay to play, we lose students. And the benefits of that, I don't know if that's federal money, grants. I know I've had a couple people reach out to me about that, like, let's take a look at that. So I would like hopefully we could have where pay to play in the long run goes away. I know we have to have it in the short run at some level, but
Well, I'd love to have what Caldwell has.
yeah.
I'd love to have a $4.5 million levy that everybody voted for. Okay, that's why they don't have pay to play. So, and some of their other extracurricular activities and the way their school is and stuff like that. We just don't have it. So at this point, I guess we've got to do what we've got to do to try to keep the very best scenario possible.
So what do we do, like football? What if you only have 100 kids come out for football?
Changes,
Like once
it changes the numbers. If we have less kids across the board, the numbers that we have here are no longer void. We got to figure out.
And that number's all up.
And that new number is not going to be, that number, we think these numbers look bad.
Right.
Yeah.
That new number will look worse.
What do your coaches say? Have the coaches reached out and said anything? Assistant coaches?
Yeah, I chatted with them about it. They hate the idea of pay to play. They understand
Right.
the budget issue. Like that's, they understand we're in this weird, unique spot. They don't like pay to play any more than I, don't like it. But there is I think they all would be comfortable with a much better number than what's on this piece of paper.
Meaning a much lower number?
Correct.
So they would prefer a much lower number.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we all would.
The bottom line is, and we talked about this earlier, Lisa, you just said it, Kirk. My greatest fear with these numbers is that it totally changes the landscape of high school athletics in Middleton because of less kids out and what that might potentially look like across the board for us. And this is after years and years of success. This is the culture and climate that are built in and through athletics that create a vibe not only in the community, but even in the school building itself.
The third string tackle is as important as a starter in a team sport, especially when you're walking down the hallway with your jersey on. And that's what public education is about. And without passing a levy, it's brutal. So we have another meeting on the 27th, right?
29 or 27.
27.
And on our drop dead day to have a number is
August 1st.
Well, I think that you have to consider how much planning time you want to provide to families, right? So I believe you said we have sports starting on August 10th.
Tentatively, August 10th is the start for all fall sports for the Idaho High School Activities Association. Our first actual athletic event would be soccer on, I think it's Friday the 20th. My math's right.
So we really need to know by the 10th. Before that,
because we have to start collecting fees, and if we don't have enough to put a team together or the kids can't pay, that's my other thing. What if kids make the team and then they can't pay? What happens to those kids?
I could probably do some planning at $500 a sport, and we'd have 25% of our athletes out.
What we would need to do is develop, as harsh as this sounds, we got to develop some type of payment plan without question. You know, because not everyone's just gonna be able to write a check. That's okay, we've got to be able to develop a payment plan, but at the same time, at some point, you need to have paid it all to finish the season, correct? You
Right.
can't pay after the fact. That sort of goes against the whole idea of paying, especially if someone wrote a check up front. Well, that's not fair to that person.
Right.
Even though we've given you grace to figure out how you're going to pay for it, there's a happy balance in there with that. And that's just things we would need to look at and explore.
Could we also do some research on, with the booster clubs, or to see if there's a way to develop a scholarship?
I think that's
Or is it
twofold.
too short notice?
I don't think the issue is the Booster Club, we weren't able to have our dinner this year, right? And that's what they did. The Booster Club does a tremendous job of evening out their funds to all sorts of activities. It's not just like football gets money, right? Drama's got money, marching band's got stuff. They do a great job of spreading that out. But if you're not able to have a huge fundraiser because of the current situation, you don't have any potential funds to even help with a few scholarships along the way. Even the athletic programs themselves, they can be able to try to raise extra money for that intent, but even then it's, you're just fundraising for something now that we've never had to fundraise for. We've always fundraised for specific needs, not for a kid to actually play.
Well, and the hard part about it too, right now, we're under the gun. So I see something like that would be great. Like if we do adopt a pay to play going forward, that we look at setting up something in the future once the COVID passes to where you could have a scholarship type program. But one, people can't have fundraisers right now.
They don't have extra money.
They don't have the extra money. Where's the money going to come from to try to do the scholarships, as well as who are you going to determine that gets them? I mean, you have to develop some sort of, I guess, procedures and stuff like that, and on necessity and stuff like that. Well, we've got 3 weeks. We don't have our 3 or 4 weeks. I think in the short term, that would be extremely difficult to do. I think going forward, it'd be a great idea, because that would really help some students down the road that wouldn't have the opportunity to play. And I think it would be a really good thing for the community and everything else to have an implementation of something to that going down the road. But I think in this short period of time, I don't know how we could pull it off.
How are our coaches' contracts written? Are they per season? Are they per game? Are they per?
They are per season.
And the reason I'm asking is, let's play a scenario, right? Like you start the season, boys soccer's going, one of your players tests positive for COVID. So they quarantine your team for 2 weeks. And in that 2 weeks, they missed 4 games. And then someone else tests positive. So they have 2 weeks. And pretty soon you've paid $500 and you've played 2 games because your team was quarantined the rest of the season. Like, how does that play out? Do you know what I mean? Those are things unprecedented. We don't know the answers to, but I just think those are things that too, in the back of our mind, it's going to be the same conversation we're having in this reopening plan. We can't plan for every scenario, but I have a hard time asking for $500 from someone and saying, we might pay your coach. He might get all his money, but you might only play 2 games because they didn't really technically cancel the season. You were just quarantined for all. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, I just don't know.
Well, that's where we're gonna have to come down with some very clear-cut guidelines with that. Because we said it before, right? And if we're not playing for whatever reason.
Could we pay the coaches per game, like take their salary or their stipend and break it up so that they would get a section per?
What we intended to do this year, if they were a teacher that's coaching, in the past, we spread it over the contract year. So they got equal installments over 12 months, regardless of the season. So what we did choose to do, or planning to do for next year, is to pay it over 3 months of the season. So they would get 3 payments.
During the season that they're coaching.
So that we weren't prepaying for spring sports that then get terminated like we did this year. So that would allow us, we could present that we'll pay the 3, and if the season is ended, they would only receive payment for what they've provided to that point. Because it really comes to that it wouldn't be fair to charge a parent and then the district couldn't afford to go ahead and honor the contract if we're receiving the money. So I think that's something we would need to work out and make sure that coaches were aware. Because truly coaches between practice time make very little per hour, obviously,
Yeah.
for what they do. So, but from the district's financial burden aspect is that, if their contracts are dependent on us receiving the funds from parents and the season is canceled or delayed, we need to have the ability to not pay the remainders of the contracts, I think. And if the season's canceled completely, then, we're not in a situation where we have to deduct money from someone that they've received in advance of providing services.
And we're all just reading through questions and emails right now, just to give you an idea what's going on. One of the points that was brought up, you start scholarshiping, you're gonna still have X amount of students that wouldn't ask for a scholarship. Those students could potentially be stigmatized. You guys gotta keep that quiet. Any more discussion?
Just ideas. Let's see.
I just want everyone to know who submitted comments. I mean, we probably have, 70 emails here, do you think? Somewhere about that. And we, due to time, and a lot of them were somewhat repetitive, we didn't read every single one out loud tonight, but we individually did read all of them. There's a question, is it against the law for coaches to be paid by fees charged to parents?
No.
So anyway, I'm looking, this isn't district money, but so the funds I've got the individual sports are raising funds for themselves, but the gates for like football and basketball, that money is spread across all sports.
Yeah, so just so you have an understanding, if it's a normal year, I say just a normal year, we're having success, things are packed out, right? And please note, and in some sporting events, like a football game, we make a lot more money than we do at a baseball game or a wrestling match. Sometimes at a wrestling match, we might not even make enough money at the ticket gate to actually pay the officials. When a football game you do, right? So it helps out everyone. So what we use those expenditures for that come through ticket sales, this is my best guess this year, and this is the budget heading into this. So, goes to officials, that's all programs. It goes to the athletic trainer, all programs. It goes to facilities, all program, right? If the lights go out at the football stadium, we're not gonna come ask. Hope we have money set aside to replace all those light bulbs. It goes to game help. So everyone who's taking tickets, running scoreboard, maybe helping me with game management, that all comes out of tickets. And then we use an amount of that for Huddle, which is our video program, which the package we have, anybody at the high school can use it. I think I'm getting marching band on board this year to use Huddle. So it's not as if it's one sport only. All our sports are tied into it if they choose to use it. And then we have taxes on that, 'cause we gotta pay taxes because we're selling tickets. And then there's some miscellaneous needs. Some of that goes to the Idaho High School Activity Association as well as the SIC dues. We gotta pay those every year across the board. And then some goes to an account I have for extra stipends, you know, if coaches do extra work or if we need to pay mileage for something that goes above and beyond just the extra. But once again, that's spread out to everyone.
And my question for asking that is because that led into your minimum max calculation. So there may be a sport that on the surface seems very low cost, but they're benefiting from across the board monies that would come in from the high revenue sports, right? So that was the thought process that went through, that it's never apples to apples when you look at stipends, transportation, and the AD costs from the district standpoint. Just like college sports, football and basketball are paying for a lot across the board to keep the lights on, replace the lights when they burn out, pay the SIC dues, things you just mentioned. Okay.
Which is some justification for charging just a flat fee across all sports.
Okay. Well, I guess, in review, we know our total cuts are right at 2.3. And that comes from the 1% holdback, the 5% holdback, and the levy not passing. We know we made, on paper, 2 million in cuts. That other 300,000 is from banking on our fund balance, taking that even lower than it should be. It's already low. And so right now on paper, we're looking at 1.6 million in educational cuts. And we're stuck on this 400K number evolving athletics that are really focused on transportation, coaching stipends, and the athletic trainer. And then for those listening or coming in late, go back. Kristen gave us a rundown at the beginning of what we've cut so far. I know that question's come up a lot, and I know you've documented that, Kristen. And again, I want to encourage everyone to reach out to the school district with questions, actual numbers, follow-ups. We have those numbers down by account, and you can see where this money's going, whether it be at the school level or at the district level. I encourage direct contact with board members and, more importantly, the school, because they actually have the numbers, the actual numbers, and will share them to see. And we kind of got 13 days, I think, to have a plan for a meeting on the 27th. I guess we'll discuss that later in our meeting, but as far as our budget discussion, does anybody else want to add anything to the record or review anything?
I just wish we could get it lower before, even if the levy didn't pass, like find a way to, I know transportation would be a huge decrease, but I do feel for those families who have 3 or 4 kids that play, or 5 or 6 kids that play, and that adds up really fast, especially if they're 2 sports per kid. And knowing some people don't even know if they're going to pay rent, like that's definitely, I don't know, it's gonna be hard.
Well, I think we should pause for just a couple minutes, take a bio break, and then come back with our special meeting and call that meeting to order.
Sounds good.
Thanks, everybody. I'd like to call to order our special board meeting. Start with the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm looking for a motion to approve our agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Move into reports. COVID-19 reopening plan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we start talking about the reopening plan that you have in front of you, I just want to start with a little bit of a disclaimer on this, that this plan, it's not meant to be exhaustive. It's not going to give guidance on every scenario that we might be presented with this fall. And we are still going to have some questions and some uncertainty as we move forward into this unprecedented time. I've been asked by a few different individuals about when it will be announced, which phase we might open in this fall, and my response has been as soon as possible. I think a couple weeks before school starts, we can probably begin to speculate where we are at based on current conditions at that time. And then, within a few days before our scheduled school day, start date, have a solid plan in place for which phase we are in. But would also like to add there that, with changing conditions, that can change very quickly. And so the need to be flexible and nimble will definitely be present. In putting this plan together, we followed guidance from the Center for Disease Control, Southwest District Health, and the state prepared guidance is adopted by the Idaho State Board of Education. Additionally, we brought together our administrative team and our department heads to work together on this plan, and it was sent out to all of our staff for feedback last week. If you have had a chance to review the plan, you know that there is an option for parents or students that are wishing to continue their education in an entirely remote environment this fall. After the reopening plan is adopted, this finalized plan will be sent again to staff, likely tomorrow, assuming we have an adopted plan tonight, and also all of our parents. And then we are also prepared to then start sending out surveys to parents, to staff, and to our guest teachers that will allow us to begin planning for numbers this fall for online instruction versus face-to-face instruction. So throughout our plan, we've identified 3 stages for operations. Should we be in a position of local control, meaning there isn't a mandate in place that trumps the school district, Southwest District Health will be paramount in helping us decide which phase we start the school year in, as well as which phases we may enter and exit throughout the school year based on those changing conditions. So there's the 3 phases. We have green, yellow, red. The green signifies little to no community spread and traditional face-to-face learning. The yellow signifies minimal to moderate community spread, and where appropriate, it moves students into a hybrid model for learning. For anybody that might be confused about what that means, it would be a way for us to reduce numbers in classrooms. So we would potentially split students by family cohorts, have students face-to-face learning on a Monday, Tuesday, remote from home Wednesday, Thursday, and vice versa with the second group to get those numbers down in classrooms to where they would need to be based on pandemic conditions.
Who's taking the temperature? I see there's temperature guidelines here.
Yeah, so once we move into that yellow phase, we have put in there that there will be daily screenings, not only for students, but also for staff before they come into buildings. And we are in the process of pricing out all of those thermometers that they make them pretty easy and painless now. You walk through the door and
They're the touchless scan kind of.
do the trigger and it scans, it's completely touchless, and then they come.
The school is gonna run that. We're not relying on anybody else. That'll be ours to decide.
Michelle just sent a text and said, when we shuffle papers, try to do it quietly because it really muffles the sound.
Once we start to get those survey results back, we can start to plan a little bit more for what that hybrid model might look like. If we see that we have more students than we anticipated selecting that remote option, we might then already have class numbers so low that we don't have to go to a hybrid for the ones wanting to come face to face. So we plan to send out those surveys. Let's see, the reopening plan will go out tomorrow, staff survey out Thursday, parent survey out Friday, and the sub-survey will go out sometime between now and then. And then red is our last phase that signifies substantial community spread where full closure would be mandated and all students and staff would be moved to remote learning. Toward the end of the plan, we have included procedures and protocols for staff, students, and parents to address COVID-19, as well as the guidance for a positive confirmed COVID-19 test. And then you'll also see we have links throughout this plan. We really tried not to make the plan so cumbersome that people wouldn't read it, but also provide all of the information that helped us determine the plan. So we provided that as links. Building levels are provided as links at the end, and building administrators are working with their staff, sharing additional information and guidance with them as the start of the school year draws near. We've also included links to address special education and those students covered by an IEP, guidance from the SIC and IHSAA in regards to athletics, and the guidance provided by various governmental agencies that we considered as we formulated this plan. As I mentioned, we had sent the plan out for feedback the end of last week to staff and reviewed that feedback last night, made some changes to the plan since then. I think as you guys are probably well aware, masks, face coverings have been a rather controversial topic of concern among staff. We did have that worded as face coverings would be allowable. We updated that language this morning to say that they would be encouraged, and that if there was an ordinance in place by either the city or the county, that the school district would follow that ordinance and require face masks.
Is the schools separate by county, or our Southwest District Health separates by county versus
As
3
does
versus
SIC.
4? So Southwest District Health is going to be our go-to. That's kind of our guiding light of.
Yes, and we have worked closely with Southwest District Health both in the spring and the summer. I think everybody is well aware that we had cases both in the spring and in the summer, and we worked in partnership with them to handle each and every one of those incidents.
So if I look at this, we're saying, okay, we have an optional online school for the whole year if you want to go that way. We're not going to fight with you. You can go that direction. And if you don't want to do that, then you're partnering with us in Southwest District Health, and we're going to ride this roller coaster with the best science and the best regulation we have and requirements, and we're all in this together. Parents, teachers, students, Southwest District Health, school district, and the city of Middleton, and I guess Canyon County if that came into play. So those are the players in our decision making. That's the decision. Those are the group. I guess the state
The State Board of Education,
could overrule.
governor,
They could overrule,
they could.
but that's probably our working group that we see right now.
Pretty much all those people you named can overrule this document.
Correct.
We're
Yeah.
kind of at the bottom.
Yep, but it's.
Yeah.
I mean, given where we're at, I think it's a workable document.
I like it
And I could read it.
because it's so up in the air. I mean, how can you really see even a moment's notice in the future to see what's going on? All you can do is do the best you can to try to meet that. And I applaud you and appreciate all the hard work and with the groups and putting all this together, because it has to be extremely trying and tasking and everything else, trying to put all this together.
So our,
I I was gonna say, can you maybe address one of the things that I was confused or unclear about is what online school is versus virtual learning? If they go 2 days and then are at home a couple days, or
So
what
that's
that looks
hybrid
like.
versus remote.
Yeah, just so, because my point of reference is what happened last spring, and this is gonna look different. So I just want to clarify to everyone so we make sure we understand what those options mean.
And hybrid is probably the most difficult to talk about, right? It's the most ambiguous. It's by far has some of the greatest unknown elements in it, yet it's pretty likely we're going to see yellow at some point. So what we're trying to do and what we've heard individuals express an interest in is if we can do some synchronous learning on those hybrid days. So if I'm a Monday, Tuesday face-to-face student, when I'm at home doing my remote learning on Wednesday, Thursday, I can be online with my teacher, see the classroom, see the other students, communicate, and be a participant in that learning, which is very much different than what we had in the spring, right?
Right.
That being said, we do not currently have all of the technology and equipment to achieve that in the way that we would want to. So these are discussions that are still taking place.
So that's purchasing software and
So-
cameras? What are we looking at?
Well, so right now we've updated, our teachers upgraded them to laptops, right? We have those coming in. They do have webcam capability, but it's not, it would work well for what we were doing last spring. So if I'm a teacher and I'm sitting at home and I'm just on GoToMeeting interacting with my students from afar, it works well. But if I'm in my classroom and I'm teaching and I'm wandering around, that webcam and that laptop is not going to do ideally what we would want it to do. On the red, on remote learning, that is an area that we haven't completely detailed out yet. Obviously, then the teacher is not going to be in the classroom with students, right, where there's this live engagement. So that is kind of where that changes between remote and hybrid. So that what I just described in the hybrid, where students could be at home and really be a participant in the classroom is what we're trying to achieve. We are not there yet, but we're looking at it. We're pricing out some different options. But again, this plays into the budget conversation, right? And we don't have negotiations wrapped up at this point. And we just have a lot of unknowns, but that's the goal. That's what we are working towards.
Wouldn't it be very similar as to what we have when we have our board meetings? With the camera,
But yeah,
when it's streaming and stuff like that for the hybrid is what I'm talking about. So where you'd have students that are participating, people that are online, but yet if she's moving around or he's moving around, the camera can have a
Exactly.
wide pan of view,
yes.
similar to what we have in our board meetings on a normal basis.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then the online school is a completely different option.
Still in discussion. That's how we started that idea, that it would be more of an asynchronous model. We were going to, well, we still are planning on using the instructional specialist to help design that and run it. We're somewhat limited on areas of content, right, based on endorsements with instructional specialists. So we're looking at pairing with IDLA for some content. And seeing what options we can bring into that. And then, of course, once we send out those surveys, if numbers are overwhelmingly high, I want my student in the online school, at that point, we can begin talking to staff about, would you rather a remote teaching position at this time, which may play well into their own individual health scenario. And we can start planning in that way.
And I think just for information purposes, if the public understands, now that we've talked a little bit about school funding, it is better to enroll your student in an online school through the district than to choose to not participate or just say, we'll figure it out. The reason being is that's how we get funded. So if you decide not to enroll them or to take them to a different district, we lose that funding, which further inhibits our funding, right? And then they come back next year when things calm down or whatever. So that's the reason these discussions are also so hard, is because the numbers are still moving. That we haven't gotten any payments from the state. We haven't actually gotten our money. It's all proposed budgets. So if a bunch of the kids in the district decide not to enroll, with us or to do something different, that's gonna put additional financial burden on the district as well.
So, a side topic, Kristen, though, I've heard Napa and Caldwell are hiring like online teachers. How are they able to do that?
So, school districts were in a position where they were able to receive CARES money, stimulus money. That money was decided on your poverty levels, so your Title I numbers. And Middleton has relatively low free and reduced lunch numbers. So our stimulus money is anticipated to be, I think, $293,000. We have neighboring districts that received multi-million stimulus money payments.
So we're in the $200,000 range, and our neighbors are in the multi-millions. Okay.
I don't know, would you add anything to that from your?
I know that to be true. I believe Napa received over 3 million.
Over 3 million in
Caldwell's
Napa.
is $1.5 million. I'm sorry, that's an estimate. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's surprising how different the demographic is from North Canyon County, South Canyon.
How, on the custodial section, how are our custodians feeling about all this? New cleaning routines, additional cleaning, like what kind of, have we gotten feedback from them? Are they nervous? I know.
Well, speaking with Blue Kelly and Casey, sorry. They have done extensive research on products. They have done, and using the hydrostatic and the fogging machines and really understanding and looking at the chemical makeup of this stuff. I think they have taken a very proactive role, and then using those vendors to train their staff to know how to do it. As far as what's the personal impact, no, I haven't spoke to them, but we can certainly reach out.
Well, we've heard from a lot of the teachers. I just didn't know if they had expressed any concern one way or the other.
Answer the surveys, we can direct that specifically to them, though.
Just seeing if we missed anything or if there's other things we need to be aware of maybe on their end.
They were part of
They
this.
were part of it.
Oh, they did. So they
Yes,
saw, oh, good.
meeting with us.
Okay.
Any more questions? We know it all today.
Until tomorrow.
Change it tomorrow. Well, thanks, Kristen. Appreciate the team's work on this. That moves us into action items. And I would be looking for a motion on our COVID-19 reopening plan.
So I move to approve our COVID-19 reopening plan for 2020 to 2021.
I second it.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. Our next action item, which we don't have to take action on it, but we can have a discussion, is the pay to participate in the fees for athletics. For those of you joining late, we've had an extensive discussion earlier in the work session. I don't know if we want to have any further discussion.
I would like to say once again, thanks to everybody who did send in their comments via email. Like I said, we didn't get to, in our public hearing, we didn't discuss every single one of the emails, but all of us have read the emails that we've gotten up to this point and what have you, and some very, very good comments. I agree with many of the comments. This is a real tough time that we are dealing with, and we're just all in favor of trying to find some sort of solution to make this happen. On that notion, I would like to make a motion that we table this until the 27th meeting and have Kristen and Cheryl work together to see what it would look like to put together a plan for a pay and play very similar to our neighbors over at the West Data District at $125 a student per sport. And I would like to see what those numbers would look like as we discussed in the public hearing on moving our athletic director's salary over to the district side, as well as looking at some transportation numbers and what it would look like on a flat fee at $125 a student, providing that the levy passes. And see what those numbers look like. We know we still have to budget cut even if the levy passes. But I'm making a motion that we would like to see that and discuss that at our meeting on the 27th.
And I'll second that.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Any more discussion, I think it's appropriate. I would encourage everyone who's listening or will be listening to contact all of us. We got a little less than 2 weeks. I think after today, everybody has a pretty good understanding where we sit financially, where the monies go at the high school level, and where they go and what the district has been supporting traditionally. So I think it makes sense to have that on the agenda for the 27th.
Yeah, and I also would like to say too, I can't stress it enough for people that may have reservations or not understand exactly where this levy is going. If they have questions or anything like that, please reach out, because it's very discouraging to know that the entire staff, the school board, the administration we've cut $1.6 million out of the budget just to stay afloat and just to try to move forward. And now we're cutting even more for the athletics and everything else. And what a lot of people do not realize is this levy is not a tax increase to the taxpayers. So it's very important, and I would stress that anyone in the community that has any questions or has reservations to reach out to somebody and find out exactly what is really going on here, because I think there's many, many misconceptions out there about what this levy is for. And we've shown it, it's public record. We're showing all the budget cuts that are happening, and the budget cuts that we're going to have to cut. If it does not pass, it gets even worse. So I would just hope that the community and, the voters and people out there would really take a serious look at this final shot.
Seeing no more discussion, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. We'll see that on the agenda for the 27th. Taking a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.